So as I say, over the last year, I've been really blessed by God to be given the opportunity to work with young people. I ended up back home in Colwyn Bay, which wasn't what I expected, but I did really try and make the most of that. But I'll get to that. First off, I'm going to start telling you a story from a few weeks ago. And if you just stick with me, there is a point I will make. So you may or may not know, but me and Mum, who's just over there, hello, we love a bit of a boogie. And so recently we went to Venue Cymru to watch the Magic of Motown, which is quite a nice kind of musical night. It was really good. Did the likes of Stevie Wonder, Diana Ross, the Jackson 5. But the problem was that no one was dancing. We started off, Papa was a Rolling Stone. There was a little bit of tapping our feet in our seats, which progressed to a bit of a bum shuffle. And then finally, we got the moment we were all looking for. Someone got up and started to dance. And then we were full on up with them, stepping and clapping and joining in. So basically, that was an example of when you're going out of your comfort zone and something you may not necessarily want to do, you're kind of pushing through and doing that. And that was kind of the point of the story. And you see, in the passage that was just read, the young boy had 5 loaves and 2 fish. Quite a tasty packed lunch. He could have kept it to himself and popped home with a belly full, but no, instead he gave it to Jesus. The boy couldn't have known at the time what Jesus would do, but decided to share with him what he had. What's also amazing about this was that it was actually a young boy who chose to do this. Young people are just as amazing now as they were 2,000 years ago. Paul tells us in 1 Timothy 4:12, if we can. Thank you. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. Young people are just amazing. Over the past year, I've seen firsthand some amazing experiences and stories, and I really want to share some of them with you to show why I feel youth work is so important within the church. I've broken this talk down into 3 sections, which are the 4 P's. So sorry about this if you're a little OCD. Point 1 being purpose, point 2 being prayer and prophecy, and point 3 being practically. So, purpose or plans. Now, some of you may recognise me from quite a few years ago now, when I used to come here and attend BYG. I want to tell you about one Friday evening we had down at the church office. It was the 11th of January 2019, and we had just a regular session and then started prayer at the end. Now, Glyn will most likely have forgotten this, but he prayed for me that evening. He talked to me about how God had great things planned for me and how I have these small rewards that I keep going after. He told me that instead, if I remained faithful to God and followed him, the rewards would be so much greater, as he had great things planned for me, and God wanted me to focus on him and not get distracted. Now, Glyn didn't know much about me at the time. He didn't know I was at the part of college where drinks of Fanta turned into Fosters. Now, I didn't get it right straight away, by any means, but it's an encounter I remember to this day. BYG was an absolute blessing to me growing up. In a school environment where I had no Christian friends, it was amazing to be able to have some great times. I think there's a few pictures behind me of them, with some people my age who are Christian. I'm so grateful to all of you that helped, many in this room with BYG, whether that was running sessions, prayer, or financially giving to the church. I'm also now desperate to learn the secret of how I have so much energy on youth camps, and I think it's important to see the knock-on effect that investing yourself into youth work can bring. So I'm going to briefly share some quick stories with you today, if we go on to it. So, Fabs, the first one was Spring Harvest 2023. Now, I've been going along to this since I was tiny. And I made the bold decision this year to volunteer on the 8 to 11s. I was given a small group for the week and got to make some amazing bonds with these kids. The final day came, and I had the privilege of praying the sinner's prayer with 5 of these 9-year-olds, and they gave their life to Jesus for the first time. In all honesty, there was a tear or 2 welling up, but I tried to play it cool and casually brush them aside. But it was amazing to see 80 children in the 8 to 11s venue alone gave their life to Jesus for the first time. Yeah. Go on, that's amazing. So next is Limitless 2023. This was this summer just gone. It was the first time I'd been here, and I decided to do it back to back with Dreaming the Impossible, which was a brave, but in hindsight, a little naive decision. I was on the 5 to 11s for this, which was the team's kids and youth leaders' kids. And Limitless is primarily a festival for teens. It's one of the Soul Survivor successes after it. And there's a worry sometimes that when you're doing the kids' work, it can turn into a bit of babysitting. This wasn't helped when they said the theme this week was Frozen and Megamind. But wow, it was amazing. They built on it and looked at a theme of transformation. And children as young as 5 were praying for one another and being absolutely captivated in worship. Again, seeing God move through young people. And the next one, please. Fab. So this is Skate Life. Now, this is a huge passion of mine. So back in Colwyn Bay, I do some work with Youth for Christ, and it's run by an American guy called Corey, and he's set this up over the past year within Colwyn Bay specifically. When I met him, I was so keen to get involved. He has such a passion for youth work and just seeing God, especially within outreach projects as well. Skate Life involves popping down to the skate park in Colwyn Bay once a week and just offering free repairs and free snacks. A very simple thing that any of us can do. And it's an amazing example of just how opening yourself up to God and letting him use you in unfamiliar situations. For context, at the skate park, there have been reports of drugs, alcohol, and quite a bit of police involvement. It's a far cry from Sunday school. But what's amazing to see is the relationships that start to form. The first fist bump you get from the kids, and when they ask that golden question about, why do you do this? And you get to tell them a little bit about Jesus. We recently also got to host community sessions as well, with a day where we got some pros down from London, and that was just amazing seeing the whole community get behind it. It's a real passion of mine and one of the most rewarding types of youth work for me, because it's a real example of bringing church to them on their own home turf. In verse 6 of the passage before, Jesus mentioned how he asked Philip the question about the food, as he already knew what was going to happen. It was just to test him. He had a plan, a bigger picture. This is true for ourselves. God has a plan. God has a bigger picture for all of us, and we won't surprise him. What I'm trying to get across is the amazing things you can see when you focus on God, like Glyn told me to 4 years ago. Everyone has different gifts that God wants you to use, and if you feel any of them could align with youth work, then I can't encourage you enough to take that leap and get involved. It can give you a real sense of purpose, seeing the difference you make in the lives of young people. And I really feel God works in the present, but also within the future. Sometimes you see him at work in yourself, in the here and the now, and sometimes you'll see it in the future like Glyn has today. But he'll work within you, and it's also God's purpose and calling for some of us too. If we go to the next slide, it says in Proverbs 19:21, we're told many are the plans in a person's heart, but it's the Lord's purpose that prevails. We may all have plans or ideas of what we want right now, but I want to encourage you to pray into whatever that may be for yourselves. Over the coming days, as it may be youth work, it may be something else, but whatever it is, trust in God and let his purpose prevail over your own plans. Just like the young boy who gave his food over to Jesus and trusted in him for its purpose, he really had a servant heart and gave what he had. This is such a good example of how we can learn from our juniors as well as our elders. We can and should give God our time, money, and whatever we believe he's calling us to. So if we move on to the next slide, it's prayer and prophecy. Now, I'm a firm believer in prayer and trusting in God. I think it's an important part to pray and rest in God's presence at all times, but especially when it comes to serving, ministry, and generally what he wants us to do in order to serve him. This was apparent when I joined Trent Vineyard down in Nottingham. Within the first few Sundays, they advertised serving on team at Dreaming the Impossible. I thought it was a really fantastic way to fully throw myself into a new church. So if we go to Dreaming the Impossible itself, here's a few little photos, and I think some youth actually attended here alongside from Barnabas, from the Beacon. But that's a story for another time. Anyway, this is the second year I've been to DTI, and in the last year alone, it's grown by 1,000 young people. This year alone, we had 370 kids become Christians, 202 of which were for the first time. What was beautiful is Ben, one of the leaders on the stage, would start the kind of sinner's prayer, the prayer of redemption. And midway through, a young person would pluck up the courage to go and walk down to the front. And everyone would just stop and start clapping, just showing how much they cared about every single sheep and also their brothers and sisters within Christ. Now, this festival has been firmly built on a foundation of prayer. And in a second, I'm going to play a little snippet from a preach by Josh Green. He's an amazing guy, and he runs 24/7 Prayer Youth under Pete Gregg. So we'll just get it up in a second. In the meantime as well, what was really cool as well is from the 2 years, you really get out what you put in. So the first year, I took a very kind of backseat role. We were doing campsite hostings, just effectively fixing tents and just being a friendly face. But the second year, I was serving with some pastors, and they were really proactive in terms of going out and praying for people and just hearing the youth leaders as well, getting to pray for them because their life's not easy. They've got a lot going on, and just, really getting to open yourselves up, serve them and help them. But yeah, so we're going to have a little clip from Josh Green now, hopefully.
Today, God spoke a word to me over DTI, and he said this, that in 2025, this site is not going to have enough space for DTI. In 2025, this space is not going to have enough space for DTI. And it's not going to be 1 week, it's going to be 2 weeks of dreaming the impossible. And it's not just going to be DTI that's going to grow. your youth group is going to grow. Your school is going to start getting turned upside down. Because God is coming to our nation with a revival. I had the privilege of going over to Asbury University. I've seen it with my own two eyes. I can't unsee what I saw. I saw a hungry generation of young people, and I believe that God is starting to stir something in this generation. There's no coincidence that DTI has grown. There's no coincidence, by the way, that every single youth festival in this nation this year has grown. There's no coincidence that youth groups are beginning to grow and people are starting to beginning to get saved, because people are starting to take this book seriously and take their God seriously.
That's what Josh Green had to say. And so for context as well, he talks about a place called Asbury University. I don't know if you're aware of it, but it's a place in Kentucky within America, and it's a town that has around 6,000 as its population. And they talk about one night where they were in the chapel and they were just praising God. And this group of young people were so captivated by God's presence that they stayed there for around 24 hours, and then one guy started to leave. He walked all the way across campus, grabbed his mattress, and then walked all the way back to the chapel, because he was that caught up in God's presence that he didn't want to leave even to sleep. And I think that's amazing, just seeing God at work within young people. Over 16 days, 100,000 people entered that chapel to be in God's presence with them all. People were getting saved. And with everyone, but especially with young people, if you give them that one moment in God's presence, I believe it can change everything. But Josh has a prophecy which he is confident that will be fulfilled. And at the rate DTI is growing, it certainly does look that way. But he is a man who will pray and pray and pray. This is something that can be so simple, but often can be overlooked. But I encourage you all to pray to God and trust within him. Just like the young boy trusted Jesus with what he offered to him. Jesus even prayed in the passage above as he gave thanks. Sometimes it seems a little silly to remind people to pray, but it's also so important and a good reminder that anyone can and should. In the passage, the prayer preceded the miracle, and this can be true within ourselves too. Prayer can precede miracles. So please pray. You see, even if you don't feel that you have the gifts for young people and you don't feel this is your purpose, this is an area of ministry that you can and should support, and this can be through prayer. So we go on to the next slide again. So this is practically. So in the clip before, they mentioned revival, specifically within the upcoming generation. And I think that's amazing. We can see a generation start to be on fire for Jesus. And remember, there's nothing special about these festivals. Start here, in and around Whitchurch. Surely that's something you want to see in your own town. Sometimes people can be a little nervous to talk about revival. But Jesus says in Matthew 28, go therefore and make disciples of all nations. In the passage, Jesus asked the disciples to give the bread out, a very simple task. In the book of Matthew, chapter 14, which is a similar one, just one of the different Gospels, he says, you go give them something to eat. He's given them something to do practically, and he calls us to do practical things too. But how? Well, the answer is like the young boy, we need to offer up our loaves and fish to the Lord. Amen. But what can this look like within the Beacon? Rather than 2 fish, we can give time to sign up and help out with youth work. That can be BYG, a community outreach project, or even sign up to be on team at a festival. Rather than 5 loaves, we can offer some of our finances or prayers towards the work that the church is doing. There's a role for everyone if they wish to help out practically or behind the scenes, both of which being immensely important. So in summary, if you take nothing else away from this, remember that youth work is a team effort where we all have a role which we can fit in. If we go to the next slide, we have the mentors. Now, not just for the youth, but for the youth leaders too. For those who feel they're no longer called to specifically do active youth work, draw on any experience and authority you may have and use that to mentor the youth leaders and youth and pass on your experience and knowledge. We also have those in the family of the church as well. Some young people may lack a mother, father, or even grandfather figure, and you can be that for them and show them the love and care that your family shows you and pass that on to within your church family. Give the young people a chance to belong in church so that they can believe in Jesus. And then we also have the actual leaders as well. Those who really want to lead the youth. You may have heaps of experience, you may have none. But you all have a heart to really see young people encounter Jesus. And that's just really cool. So to go back to my story at the start, I told you it makes sense, hopefully. When the music is playing and your feet are tapping, are you going to stay on the sidelines, or are you going to get up out of your seat and dance with God? We all have a choice, sit back or get involved. And we can really see a revival generation on fire for Jesus. So who are you going to be? It's our collective responsibility. Now, before we go back into a time of worship, I'm going to leave you with a Bible verse, as Jesus summarized it much better than I ever could. In Matthew, Jesus says, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these."